Good day. My name is Marendeni Tangeni. I'm a fourth-year dietetics student at Nelson Mandela University under the Department of Human Nutrition and Dietetics. Originally, I'm from Limpopo and I am Venda. So today here we are here to talk about indigenous vegetables. These vegetables are important, but we often neglect them because we don't really know the benefits of these vegetables. I am happy today to have Ms. Mofono, my former first and second year lecturer in nutrition. Could you kindly introduce yourself to the public?
Thank you, Murendeni. My name is Zithandile Mfono. I'm a first year and second year lecturer in nutrition, and I'm part of the Department of Human Nutrition and Dietetics. And I'm also a PhD candidate at the department, and my research focuses on indigenous vegetables. And by the way, I am Xhosa. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I am really interested in indigenous vegetables because these vegetables are often available for us to use, but we don't know the benefits of these vegetables. So please tell me about your research highlighting its knowledge in the curriculum in your department.
Okay, so my research currently focuses on African women as the main knowledge holders of indigenous vegetables. This practice has been there among indigenous communities in Southern Africa, the Khoi, the San, and the Bantu people. They would consist of plants that grow in that local region, and the people would pick them and they would use them as vegetables. It has been something that has been practiced predominantly up until the recent past, largely in the rural areas of our country, but you're finding that with urbanization, people moving to townships, and also with the history in South Africa of people being relocated, some of that knowledge does get lost over time. And what you're also getting is that with the younger populations, the knowledge is not well passed on to the younger people. And we do have a crisis with a lot of food insecurity among indigenous populations, including here in South Africa, where socioeconomic problems and poverty still dominate among indigenous groups of people, and thus finding that their diets tend to be low in dietary diversity, not enough fruits and vegetables, which is where we are thinking of that ability of indigenous vegetables to kind of also supplement the mainstream or what is locally available in the shops. And we're also finding that there's a lot of non-communicable diseases. The prevalence is quite high, along with the other socioeconomic problems among this population group. So African women, as the main knowledge holders, also at risk of these non-communicable diseases, are like the focus of most of my research to improve or to support the practice of adequate vegetable intake.
What are your views on the roles of indigenous knowledges in the curriculum in your department?
This is, for me, a complex question because when it comes to curriculum, a lot of the discussions happen among academic literature, our textbooks, and our articles, while you find that among indigenous groups, a lot of knowledge is passed through oral discourse, so with the oral traditions of passing on from grandparents to their children and vice versa. So I find that indigenous groups of people tend to not be well represented, with their voices are not as well heard within the academic space just in general. Why? I mean, it's a complex one. And also in the higher education sector, you're almost like focusing on the higher level. But what happens in primary school and high school? And if we're not talking about indigenous vegetables at the schools, and all they talk about is the food pyramid, which is American, and how do we marry that so that we see it happening in the lower levels of education all along? Because what is happening is that in my research, I'm picking up that a lot of younger people, they associate the indigenous foods as being poverty foods because it's not in their literature, it's not at school, it's only known by grandmother. And when they see that, they disassociate themselves from it. So that's what I'm saying. It's within the dietetic space, coming back to the higher education curriculum, what I do see is that because a lot of these vegetables are quite dense in nutrients, a lot of them are rich in vitamins and minerals and fiber, and some of them even protein, which is very rare among vegetables sources. So what I see is that the dietetics curriculum can be very enriched with the knowledge that we know or we have from indigenous vegetables. But there is obviously that disconnect between the oral history and knowledge that comes from indigenous people and also the written academic discourse, which is textbooks and articles.
Okay, thank you so much. How do you envisage incorporating your research focus into your learning and teaching strategies?
This one has actually been one of the passions that has ignited my current research, because in 2019 I got an engagement fund from the university. So from that year I've started to engage in engaged research and lecturing. So where I would take the nutrition modules and use the practicals that the students were working on to develop nutrition education materials. We started working with one school in KwaZulu called Seisi Primary School, and we planted one of the indigenous vegetables there. We used it to educate the primary school learners about it. And then we also worked on developing materials so that the teachers could also use that material, pamphlets, posters, to use in the classroom, working with the food preparers in the school just to let them know about it. We worked on food expos, World Food Days, and then we also did 2 colloquiums, nutrition colloquiums, where we brought in the teachers from the different schools in Nelson Mandela, and we presented what along the school nutrition program within that framework. And we presented these indigenous vegetables as part of the offering for vegetable intake. And in the subsequent but in the colloquium last year in 2023, we brought in social development. So we did they call them nutrition centers around the Nelson Mandela Bay, where we again presented the offering of indigenous vegetables to supplement the diets that were being offered at the nutrition centers from the local Nelson Mandela Bay nutrition centers. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Could you please share your views on how these indigenous knowledge focus can contribute to graduate attributes contextual to the communities your students will work in?
That has been also the passion I've had in terms of just building social awareness, I think, and being a responsible citizen, because a lot of these indigenous plants, they tend to thrive better in very climate adverse environments. We're having a lot of climate challenges with flooding, with droughts and all of that. So indigenous plants by nature tend to thrive better within environments because they belong in those environments. So it's students being aware of being aware of those plants and being aware of the nutritional values and being able to adapt within whatever context. I mean, there's indigenous plants in every area of the world. Where they move to, they're able to use the knowledge of the indigenous people to incorporate into curriculum and thus be able to incorporate it later on in their practices, where we don't neglect knowledge that is already there because the textbook says cauliflower, broccoli, That is one of the aspects. And also being adaptive, I think, is one of the graduate attributes, being able to adapt to whichever indigenous population you find yourself among, whether you move to New Zealand, where there are indigenous groups of people, or any other area of the world, you are able to learn about the culture and the cuisine of that group of people and be able to learn about the nutrients behind it. And then I think lastly, creativity and innovation, because I talk about modernizing culture, and expressions of that I find myself using even the way we dress. We don't wear umbhaco the way we wore it before. Now it's become modernized, beautiful designs of modern traditional take of attires that we wear. You take even examples of jewelry where now the beads are no longer what they used to be, but they're still beads and they represent the culture and the tradition. So that creativity, innovation of being able to take what we know and be able to bring it to the future and even the current. So I think those are some of the attributes that I think would be great to impart among students of human nutrition and dietetics.
Okay, thank you so much. It is interesting that we are having this interview on the World Food Safety Day. Could you please highlight or add on food safety on these indigenous vegetables to people out there or street vendors?
Thank you, because a lot of these vegetables are sold on informal markets with street vendors. So food safety is a concern because we know, especially in urban areas, there's a lot of environmental contamination. If people are picking them from the sidewalks or they are picking them from a dump site, that could be a risk because of the contamination. So making sure that they pick plants from a safe area, and also washing them well before they prepare them. And lastly, also just knowing which plants to pick, because if you're not well mentored by someone who's well knowledgeable about the plants, you could pick something that could be toxic. So you also need to be aware that you need to also have had some form of mentoring or people around you who've taught you how to pick the right plants. So World Food Safety Day is a big concern internationally, and I think it also relates to your indigenous vegetables. Thank you so much for having me on this discussion.
And thank you so much for attending.
A pleasure.